in sewers and they're singing slugs and a lot of like 90s R&B and punk
And
music
I
playing in the background.
too am a claymation rat running around in a circle in a sewer. And we are live here to chat about all the TV that we watched this week. And you heard it right. Due to the writers' strike and SAG strike, we will very shortly be forced to watch nothing but Nemo, Shark Tales, Flushed Away, and Ratatouille, but not this week. This week, we actually have a very full agenda. So let's just soak it up for one of the last times that we actually have quality television before we enter a barren desert for a good cause. With that being said, before we get started, Kate and Carey, are there any news items for this week? Also, how are you?
I am good, and I don't have any news this week. Womp womp.
I am also doing well enough, and I don't know of any news either. Um, Please, someone share something.
I will take good and I will take well enough. I don't know that there's a lot of news going around other than like fun things like the Taylor Swift tour getting new dates. A bunch of the Arrow Legends of Tomorrow and Flashcast will be at Dragon Con here in a couple weeks. That'll be super fun. But not a lot of TV stuff going around because of, you all know it and can say it with me, the strike. So what we are going to talk about is the end of The Witcher to get things started, and then we'll move on to some fun stuff like Only Murders in the Building, aka The Last Good Show, before we enter that desert. Let's just kick things off with The Witcher. Let's just get it out of the way. And to do so, I want to get a temperature of the room here. First of all, who's watched the latest season of The Witcher? Okay, we got a hand. And Kate, I want to know your thoughts stepping out of this now, knowing that even if it gets worse, we're about to have not a lot of nice things for a while. What are your feelings going into the next leg of this journey? Did this live up to your expectations? As somebody who is familiar with the prior stories, right?
I have read some of the books, but I haven't read all of them. And I haven't read what's being covered now. So I had very little amount of expectations going in, except for that it was a pretty good episode 5 to leave off of. It was fun. It did kind of get a little too heavy-handed with the we're going to play the scene 5 times from 5 different angles to tell you the story. But I always like a refreshing twist on storytelling, and I will take that bait, hook, and sinker with it. That being said, not to speak ill of our beloved and, necessary writers, what was the last 3 episodes? What was that? Why, what was that?
I really almost it got too long, but I was trying to title this something about like, well begun is sometimes not half done. Well begun is sometimes just setting people up for like really high expectations that you're not going to meet. Now, with that being said, I have a question for both of you, and this question is the reason why I wanted to even just start with The Witcher and get it out of the way, because I think that this is a theme we can kind of think about as we're talking about some other episodes, maybe Only Murders in the Building this week. What do you think about one-off character-centric episodes? So we've all seen them. And in The Witcher, there's a particular one where there's sort of this one-off episode where we have Ciri, who is she's like thrust into like no man's land desert, and she's visited by like the 3 ghosts of Christmas Eve or whatever to like tell her that she should use fire magic to cure a unicorn and like kind of sell out her powers or whatever, but also get stronger in the process. It's all cool, super fun and fresh in general. But with that in mind, what do you guys tend to think about those one-off episodes in a season or a story where it's only about one character's like micro journey?
They can be really great, but they have to be extraordinarily necessary for them to be great. I think back to my tried and true examples of Gemma Simmons
Yeah.
in season 3 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. That was a necessary episode. She was completely on her own, and you had to tell what's been happening to her, but you couldn't tell it concurrently because it would spoil things and it would ruin reveals and it would kind of step on the toes of the story that Fitz was having. So you had to wait to tell it. And it also allowed both the like amazing writing and acting of that scene to really feel fleshed out, and it gave you time to really live in her emotion. Great. And that is what you should use those episodes for. When you have really necessary things that you couldn't tell concurrently with other parts of the story, where the writing can hold up and the acting can hold up for an entire episode by themselves. And I think you see where I'm going with that
I
in
do.
respect to The Witcher.
Yeah.
Um, I have made my opinion on the TV version of Ciri known, which is just eh. I don't hate her, but there's a lot of times where I just wish she would grow up. I wish the writing would be more consistent. And uh, it wasn't necessarily an inconsistent episode, but it was almost too consistent, where it took a real long time for us to get to the breaking point.
So here's the question I will have, right? So is it a situation where you had this character-centric episode because, to your point, there was this story that needed to be told and was necessary to tell it through this character, or was it a situation where there was during previous episodes there were plot points that they basically may have, hey, we forgot that she exists, so let's catch up with her. I'm just interested to know which way did it lean more of? Was it like, hey, this is a story we have to tell, and we have to tell it through this character, or was it, hey, we haven't given this character anything to do, so bam, here you are, let's get it out the way, and then move on to other stuff?
That's a good question. And it is the first one. It is a story they did have to tell, and they did have to tell it through that character. I really like that character, by the way. I think Ciri's great. I think she's played great. Like, it's great. But she, as a character and as an actress, is surrounded by a lot of really strong players. You've got Henry Cavill, you've got Anya Carlotta, you've got a lot, like, you've got side characters, like real side characters that, barely get a few minutes of screen time who are just incredible. And she's younger, she's newer, and she's great, but she's not necessarily always going to hold up to that. So it's interesting because in that episode, she really shines. She's given really incredible stuff to work with, and she really does shine, but nobody else does because we don't really see them almost at all. And she's not interacting with them. And, we all know cases where an actor can be like good, but if you put them opposite somebody who's great, you can really get some good stuff. So we saw some really good stuff with Ciri and Yennefer this season, where she's with this sort of like mother-ish figure, and because the older of the two, the mother figure, whatever, is played by a really great actress and also quite seasoned throughout the show, her presence can kind of elevate it and bring out really great stuff in series. So that was really rewarding to watch this season. So it was necessary to tell this part of the story, but extending it so long, giving it so much screen time near the end, and focusing only on Ciri, it achieved a goal of making sure she shines and sticks out in your mind, which is necessary, I guess, in that they're about to lose Henry Cavill, so she's about to have to carry this with a whole host of others. But she is the chosen one. She is, if think of any fantasy show, she is the one who's going to save the world. It served as sort of a launching pad, but I'm curious, for Kate, who's watched it, or Carey, for you who hasn't watched it, when there is a chosen one and a lot has to come together and kind of be chopped off to the side in order to give them a moment to shine, are you generally left feeling rewarded, or like, okay, I guess now we got to get to the point where like our one character that we're supposed to care about, goes on their final journey and we see nothing else? That's kind of a leading question. I don't know.
Well, and I'll add some meat to that question. There's extra issue with I have with the this particular use of the one-off character episode, in that it was the penultimate, the penultimate episode of the season. So the pacing felt weird. It felt very weird for you to go from every character to one character back to every character for the final three.
Mm-hmm.
It also, while yes, being, I would agree, necessary for her story, it did still also give the impression of leaning into, we forgot to tell her story earlier, so now we have to tell it now.
Mm-hmm.
Because Siri is an interesting character, because as much as the show is advertised and somewhat framed around it being the main character is Geralt, is Henry Cavill's character,
Mm-hmm.
the books, the games, and to an extent even the show recognize that after a while it switches from Geralt being the main character to Ciri. And at the very least, Ciri is the main subject if Geralt is the main character, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. She is the savior, she is the one to kind of unite the worlds, and he is the savior's protector. And right now we're still in the stage of she is not powerful enough to save the world. She is not powerful enough to unite the world. She's still a kid. And everybody's after her to basically be in charge of the power that saves the world.
Mm-hmm.
So they are trying to balance it focusing on the savior's protector while also making her grow into being the savior. And sometimes we're not getting enough character development with her. And because of that, they really wanted to give us a long exposure episode of her developing and growing and being on her own, and having a moment of being unshielded by the two people that are trying to protect her, Yennefer and Geralt. And I get that. I get why you want to do that. I get on both like mechanic level, technical level, as well as storytelling level, why all that's necessary. I just felt like the timing, the framing, some of the writing, the pacing, all made it feel very stretched out, and it lost a lot of its impact by becoming almost unfocused on what the point was.
I think I like two terms that you just mentioned, stretched out and unfocused. And I agree. And I think here's how they kind of get away with it and why it's still entertaining and still really, transfixing to watch. She's supposed to be wandering around in a desert, lost and confused and having visions and delusions and whatever. And therefore, it is supposed to feel stretched out, endless, and disoriented. Now, we don't really want our episodes to feel stretched out, endless, and disoriented. So I wouldn't say it entirely lands on all 4 feet in that sense, but I think they can kind of get away with those tonal points. And Carey, to your question, it is a very good question, because in thinking through it, it does end up feeling more necessary when we take into consideration what she has to do next and where she has to go next, and how several points, the last time all 3 of us talked about this, particular character who's pretty key in the story in general, but she's key in the season in particular, we were struggling a bit, but came back around with how okay, she's 16, 17, and she's acting 16, 17. That's so annoying because 16, 17-year-olds are so annoying, right? And then they bring us back around, and also 16, 17-year-olds are supposed to act that way, so it's fine. And I think at this point at the end, and as I understand it, there's a good chance there's some sort of time jump of sorts between season 3 and season 4. This is sort of allowing us to see her getting set on a rapid trajectory to mature quickly, to go through a bunch of crap, not all of which we're going to be able to see on screen, just in terms of, time and limitations, and getting to a place where we can start season 4. So the answer, I guess, is yes, but it's a begrudging yes, because every minute we spend wandering around the desert is a minute we don't get to spend with the witch coven or the whatever the people are in the forest who are like snarkily healing Geralt, or that one guy that kind of rando became king after somebody killed the king, and whatever. You can tell I've been paying attention to names as much as ever. I will also say that this show reminded me of Riverdale. Let me explain. In Riverdale, the latest season, the one nobody's watching, there is a musical episode. You won't be shocked to find out. And in this musical episode, they're writing a musical for like their high school musical or like some bullshit, right? And the guy, like the random side character, artsy guy who's writing the musical is writing about Archie. Riverdale's based on the Archie comics. Even if you're not watching the show, the narrator, they're not. The main character is Archie, the redhead guy. So this musical and the whole episode, they're like, why is the musical about Archie? Like, who cares about Archie that much? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And it's sort of this tongue-in-cheek thing of like, somehow this guy's the main character when like nobody's paid attention to him in like 5.5 seasons type of thing. That's kind of how I felt here. Now, with like way more respect, because like love Siri, chosen one, like if she's only got one fan, it's me. You know what I mean? Like she's great, and I think acting, writing, what like it's all good. There's just like she's just set next to like better than good. So many points at this that it almost felt like we get one character centric episode, and because like we got like a Yen and Gerald, whatever. 3 seasons in, and like his name does not phonetically make sense to me. You know how I'm talking about. Yen and her blonde boyfriend. We get a episode centric around them where we're like, that's the like subterfuge dance scene cut like 5 different ways, whatever. But it's about them. It's not just about like one character. Whereas like last season, season 2, we did get a Yen centric one, and then like all of season 1 was a Witcher-centric one, whatever. So now we're starting to get our first taste of series-centric, and that just gave me a little pause. But you know what didn't give me a little pause? You know what I don't think gave any of us a little pause? You know what I think we all marathoned with the speed of 1,000 Russian racehorses? Only Murders in the Building is back. Round of applause. What did you guys think of this wonderful, mysterious streaming TV show on Hulu that got Meryl Streep? Take it away.
Honestly, the cast has always been absurd. How they get half of the people on there is just it's incredible. I loved it. I think it's a great first 2 episodes to start with, especially like one of my favorite things about the show is how much they lean into the tongue-in-cheek jokes and like recognizing that this is a TV show kind of level of jokes, but we couldn't make a podcast about it. He didn't die in the building, or he even said something about this is the 3rd season. I loved those jokes, and they've done it throughout the whole show, and there is a certain level of that you're watching tons of just industry giants having the time of their lives, and that you're watching Meryl Streep. You also feel like you're watching this woman fumble her way through theater acting, and I absolutely loved the first 2 episodes.
I am glad you mentioned that because I was wondering, I did you sort of did you sort of get taken out of anything because it's freaking Meryl Streep, right? Um, and so I felt that just to a little bit, but like I said, I think the last time we talked, it's like going to a really good party with some really good people, and you just want to be hanging around them and hear their freaking stories, man. Um, I really enjoyed the first 2 episodes. To be honest, I almost felt like, particularly Paul Rudd's character, I thought it was sort of going to be like a sort of one-off. Hey, he drops dead in the first 5 minutes, and that's it, because he goes on to do something else. I really like the way that they've incorporated his character longer than that, and it's just fun, man. As soon as I turned it on, man, I smiled basically from the start to the end, man. It was just fun.
My cat is doing his level best to attack everything I have in front of me right now. Um, but I will do my best to press on regardless. Um, I have a couple questions. Number one, did you buy the original murder? Did you fall for the he's actually dead bit? Number two, Do you think he's actually dead now? Like, are we buying it now that we see the body? Is everything actually as it seems, or is this all like low key still a campaign to get buzz for the show? What are our current theories?
My personal theory is I have to believe that he's really, really dead now, right? Because if he's not, then you have to assume and imagine that it's a publicity stunt, right? And who sort of stands to gain the most because of that? And it puts the bullseye right on who would be like behind this the most, and it would be Oliver, right?
Right.
And so yeah, and so
Anything in
I
that,
think I
yes.
think yeah, I think if he's dead, I think if he wasn't dead, then all fingers point to Oliver as being like the mechanism behind it, which is why I believe he actually is.
Yeah, I didn't fully believe there were some weird things about when he first died, but that was so quickly resolved. But once he came back, I very much knew that was a dead man walking. I knew he was going to die. He was still going to be the murderer. He just hadn't fully taken his last breath yet. And it gave us the cool, and we're eventually going to have they're going to solve who initially murdered him. What the initial plan was, he was probably in on it, honestly, for what he was either the producers or his brother or somebody else that actually probably helped him use that as like a, hey, I recognize I've been awful. Let's do like a image reset by me faking my death, coming back and being alive. And hey, now people have to like me. I died. And then the real murder is probably somebody who actually didn't like him. And that list is very long because I didn't know
Yeah.
Paul Rudd could maybe not like him.
I really appreciated that they've chosen one of my favorite tropes that you can have in a murder, which is everybody hated the guy and many people had a reason to
Mhm.
harm him. And so there's no like shortage of suspects, but everybody had a different reason. So there's, yeah, it's a good Agatha Christie classic.
Right. And you just wonder, are they going to lean into that route, considering that like Murder on the Orient wasn't that long ago, right?
Right.
Uh, what's also interesting to me is like they keep messing around with like the time jumps that they're doing, right? Going back a
Right.
few months and then obviously going back to show themes from what was the name of the show? The Girl Cop. Well, I can't remember
Girl
the name of the show.
cop.
Girl
Anyway,
Cop,
yeah,
Brazra.
yeah, 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 yeah. But the funny thing about it is Paul Rudd looks the same as he did like 20 years ago. So
Right.
it's like when they're doing time jump, he just looks the freaking same. Put some like frosted tips on his hair, but it's still the same dude, which is crazy.
Hmm.
Which is kind of like the tongue in cheek joke, I guess, of it.
Absolutely.
I there's just a few moments throughout this where I'm like, even if the story sucked, which it doesn't, even if the like main characters sucked, which they don't, I would watch this show just for the Meryl Streep audition monologue, just for the like, okay, you know how annoyed I get because I talk about it every time whenever there's like a musical episode in a show that wasn't previously a musical and I'm like, oh my god, and like I want to forward through it, whatever. Except for this musical episode has Selena Gomez on stage. Like it's just like it just makes sense. Like this is what all of the other shows were wanting. This is what all the other girls are trying to be. Only Murders in the Building is her. She is the it girl.
Hmm.
She is the moment. It's you know what else I love? I love the length of these episodes. They're not like your 20-minute comedies, but they're
Hmm.
also not your like full 60-minute they hit right at that like 35, 38-minute mark. Perfect. So
Hmm.
well edited.
Yeah. Well, and something about that timestamp as well is just, we've talked about it before. I love how every is in the building, but every episode also has its own slight style of editing. And some we've now that we're in season 3, I would say that we've had some repeats with this has the same style signature as like so like this episode 2 had a similar style signature where Mabel is having visions of her dad. They do this to Mabel every.
Kate is cutting out for me. Is Kate cutting out for you, Carey?
Yes, she has.
Rip. She was just about to reveal who the murderer was this season. So that's what you're
We
missing
had to silence her.
during that.
You, I did have a question for you,
Yeah.
and something that struck me about the first 2 episodes. Uh, I felt a mortality or a sort of like end point to whatever degree in these first 2 episodes. Whether it's like whether it's over or to be honest, in show there felt I felt some vulnerability, particularly for Oliver, because I don't know that we've been dealing with murder, but I don't know that we've ever dealt with mortality in any other way other than someone's life being cut short because of some other menace, right?
Mm-hmm.
But introducing his heart issue brings in some mortality. The fact that Mabel's apartment is going to be up in a few months, that there's some endpoints within this season. It sounds like or feels like that has you wondering. There could be a lot of things on the table, and I'm just wondering, is everyone going to make it out of the season like unscathed or untouched? And I don't know that. I can say the first 2 seasons I would have said they're fine, they're untouchable. This season I have this palpable sense that something bad could happen to one of our favorite people.
I definitely agree. And I think that's one of the reasons why it makes it interesting to me that they chose to do that fake out at the beginning of the murder on stage that wasn't a murder on stage. And we actually do have a murder in the building. Because when you do that for the first season, okay, that's the situation. You do it for the second season, okay, they kind of could explain away how this could happen twice. But when you do it for the third season and now it's kind of almost random and, unexplainable, it lulls you into a false sense of security of, okay, this is going to be a season, routine of every season's going to be the same and it's always going to be this building and there's always going to be this murder in the building that they are solving, right? And that I think is going to lull audience members into a false sense of security despite these undertones of, okay, wait, these are, older gentlemen who have health problems and they could die or move or have a serious injury that necessitates like a different facility, whatever. Mabel is a young woman in like a high transition point in her life. And, single women in their late 20s, early 30s do not generally live in the same apartment for years and years on end. They're going to the next job or the next what, like you're aware of this situation, but just by virtue of the show's magic, they're going to suck us into a false sense of security and then they're going to kill somebody in the end of our trio. I agree. Well, maybe not this season, but a season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They started to do it a little bit in season 2 where they tested not our faith, but like every once in a while they would take a moment to remind us of the mortality of the 3 main characters.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I agree that this beginning of the 3rd season, they've really come at hard. Hey, remember, these are people too with their own livelihoods, and we could also hurt them. And it's that interesting way of season 1, we liked all 3 of the characters, but there was less the emotional buy-in as to who they were and what they were interested in. And
Mm-hmm.
season 2 really stepped up in why we care about them specifically. And I think season 3 is really going to do it more.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, last question I have for Only Murders in the Building. Where do you want it to go from here?
And
Do you want somebody from the trio to die? Like, do you feel like we're at that point? Like, we need to kill or get off the pot?
I don't want any of them to die because I love that dynamic, but I do kind of want maybe not death, but like one of them is grievously injured and they are in the hospital for a while, then we get like the two others are running the investigation and having to report back to them for a bit. Something like that, something to really show us these are people that don't have, super abilities. These are just average people running around into dangerous situations that could get them hurt or, just have a heart attack.
I, yeah, I agree as well. I don't need or want to see any of our heroes perish, but I do feel like there's got to be some transition that happens at the end of this season or next, because again, we're in season three, only murders in the building. How many people are going to die in the building? Are you just going to start dragging dead bodies off the street just to like meet the premise, right? I could see them deciding to go meta in some way, particularly having the stage and the platform that they have with this quote unquote big star that he's died and we have this murder to solve. I can't imagine that if they solve this murder, it doesn't garner the attention of someone in Hollywood to say, this might make for a really good movie. Let's bring them in to do it. And you get sort of that transition, whether that's sort of the end of it or if they figure out a way to carry on what they do on a bigger stage, either whether it's New York or Hollywood or whatever. But I just feel like if you bring in the possibility of more eyes on them solving this murder, it has to mean something if they actually do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I it makes sense that their podcast will eventually become, if it escalates, would eventually become not a podcast. They have somebody with stage experience, as they're reminding us this season. They have somebody with TV experience, as they reminded us last season. Mabel is there. And it makes sense that they would put that into play in some way, because while the set has always been the building, it has been since season 1 extremely industry adjacent. Like, this whole show has always continuously stayed very industry adjacent, frequently referencing entertainment industry just in general. So now we're dabbling in stage, but yeah, it would make sense. Next step would be,
I
not
mean,
necessarily return to TV, but movie. Yeah.
because if they solve murders, it only makes sense to say, hey, let's start writing our own murder mysteries ourselves, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it just feels like a natural progression. Um, and it sort of solves all of their problems, right? In terms of being a washed up producer, an aging actor, and like a young person who doesn't have her way. This helps them all sort of get to a good place.
Yeah.
Well, and I'd also say if they take that step, if they do the movie step and they ship them out to Los Angeles and like season 4 set in LA instead of um, New York, the great thing about how they framed the show is it is the only murders in the building being the thing that's never specified.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think they could always kind of ride the concept of it's always just their apartment building, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I think there is a level of the apartment building itself is a character, sometimes you need a refresh of the cast.
Yeah.
And I think by moving them to LA, we've kind of run out of the supporting cast. You've got the handful that are still there that are alive, but you've kind of really run its course of like, could they be a suspect anymore? If you ship 3 out to LA, you get a whole new cast of people that live in their apartment. You get a
Mm-hmm.
whole new apartment as a new character, and you get a whole new group of people with their own, you know, A-list potential for their casting choices, as well as characters that could be written as the various types of A-lister personalities that you're going to encounter when you're in LA.
Yeah, I think it would play really interesting in LA, especially
Yeah.
if, things shift around due to like the strikes or whatever, and it ends up being closer to a summer release rather than right now. It's been pretty consistently well, I know technically right now it's summer, but for TV it's fall. That could be interesting to do like a spring summer LA season. Well, speaking of LA, do you guys know what's in LA? Malibu.
Uh-huh.
That is a
That's where I thought you were
transition.
going.
That is a transition to Barbie Revisited. And let me give you some context on this. So, last time we talked a bit about Barbie and Oppenheimer, and I had just come off fresh of watching it, and apparently not everybody saw it immediately opening weekend. I know, crazy. But since then,
Sad.
Kate, you've seen Barbie. Carey, have you seen Barbie Oppenheimer either?
I have not seen either,
Okay.
but everyone I know has.
You're the last person
Mhm.
on earth to not see them.
Yeah.
It's okay. I want to revisit Barbie because I want to hear your thoughts. What manifestos have you taken away from this seminal piece?
You know, um, I didn't realize I was a strong Greta Gerwig fan before. I realize it now. I really like her stuff. There hasn't been anything I watched of hers that's bad. Um, and she gives me hope for my favorite, like one of my favorite things in storytelling, which is subtle storytelling. It's something that's missed a lot in storytelling, especially with kind of the still coasting inertia that we have with the superhero tropes. There's nothing subtle about those superhero shows, and if it was WandaVision, and people didn't want to see the subtlety. But because of that, I think there's a lot of scrutiny that can be placed on what is subtle, and I think Barbie is a great example of that. She really played with the levels of subtlety. There were some things that were as subtle as a frying pan, and there were things that were actually truly subtle and subtly played. And I think those elements, when people weren't willing to look and like, inspect them, has led to the discourse that kind of has encapsulated the whole experience, which is it's man hating or whatever. I'm like, were you watching it? Did you pay attention to what was on your
No, people did
screen?
not
It's
pay
not
attention and people did not watch.
people because if if there were no other men in Barbie Land, if the Kens were all that there was there, and if it was more of a glorified, it was just purely glorifying the patriarchy that came and didn't explain why it was hurting the Kens as well, then sure I would see the take that it was man hating. But there was Alan. Alan was there. He was ready to show us that it wasn't all just men. No, the kins and the patriarchy doesn't represent men. It represents how painful it can be for men to be kind of subjugated to this problem as well. And how if we put each side of the spectrum in boxes, then you're just hurting each side. And instead, we should just accept that, yeah, you can be everything. You can also just be having a rough day. And kind of pushing that message. I I will say I don't think it was perfect. I don't think the movie was perfect. I think it had a couple of fumbles in how it executed things, and especially the ending. I actually think the scene where Ken's crying and she explains to Ken again what what the difference is, why she's changed, and why she doesn't love him like he wants her to. That scene to me actually undercut some of the message. It undercut his message, it undercut hers. And I also think it softened the point and it didn't highlight, hey, this is how we're going to change going forward. Everybody is going to be kind of allowed to be whatever they want to be. Um, by doing that, I think it undercut its point a little bit. And I would say that's really the big criticism I had with that entire movie. And I think if anybody's going to point to a problem with the show in the movie, I would say it's that moment. But other than that, I think it did an excellent job of showing a lot of different things, and it was a wonderful like love story to motherhood and femininity. It was also a love language to a love story to men who just want to be good and who want to be themselves rather than what they're supposed to be. And I wish people could see, like, people who hated it or people who were talking negatively against it could just see what it was meant to be and enjoy that.
The people who hated it didn't watch it, and I
They
stand
didn't
behind
watch it.
them.
Yeah.
See that
I
that's what I was going to ask because if you see a movie and you don't like it, oh, that's fair, right? For whatever reason
mm,
it is that you don't like it. But you also have to. I'm taking into account what a platform it is to come out and say, hey, this $1 billion movie that everyone's talking about. Well, let me come out and say something contrary, right? Because I know somebody's going to want to listen to it, whether I saw the movie, whether I care about the movie. I just want eyeballs on me. I'm just wondering how much of that is the impetus for people coming out saying what they have to say. I don't know.
probably.
I think there is a lot of rage, sort of clickbaiting. I think there's a lot of taking quotes in isolation, blatantly ignoring like certain aspects of the genre. Like it's like a silly magic realism dramedy, you know?
Hmm.
If you
Yeah.
ignore that it's drama, or you ignore that it's comedy, or you ignore the magic realism element, or you ignore that this is like, Barbie is not supposed to be representing feminism or human woman. She's representing a doll who is on a journey to learn to fall in love with humans in a different but analogous way to Superman falling in love with humans, and in a way wanting to live among them and kind of be one in a way ish. We see Barbie doing that, but she's not falling in love with a human man. She's falling in love with human women, plural, like
Hmm.
human, femininity
Womanhood.
and matriarchs and, mother daughters and all of this. She's, kind of learning to love that and wanting to be a part of that, even for all of its, flaws.
So
Here's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I kind of change the topic, but if you have something to say, go ahead.
Oh,
Well, I did want to say this because it's interesting to me if your argument is going to be that this movie was a man hating, quote unquote, man hating movie, right? Um, if it made $1 billion and counting, shouldn't that tell you something about the culture of what people think? If your argument is this man hating, well, that seems pretty darn popular right now. I
right.
mean, to me, that says a lot about that more than anything else. But I don't know.
Yeah. Um, I was kind of going to point something out. You mentioned how it was kind of analogous to Superman. Uh, this point will make sense in a moment. Out of There's tons of like social media favorite moments in the movie. There's Depression Barbie and Pride and Prejudice. That was obviously directed at me, and I felt
Yes.
it. There was a handful of other ones that are quoted a lot. The America, her Gloria's scene was really used a lot. Did you have a favorite scene or moment that people aren't talking about a lot?
The Zack Snyder cut joke.
Y- Yeah, I liked that one.
That took me by the throat. I
I
Tell me about more about that because I've heard about it, but I don't. I'm sort of out of context. I don't know exactly what happened. So tell me.
Okay, Kate, do you remember?
I don't really remember because that's not actually the scene I was trying to get you to talk about. But
Carey,
I
I'm really
just
trying to place it, but it was something
I'll,
about making fun of men, and
Mhm.
I will Google it later. Let's get to what Kate wanted to get to with you. I'll Google the Snyder cut.
there's a few jokes throughout it that are sort of making fun of like men's hyperfixations, I guess.
Mhm.
And there's one where like, how do you distract a man? Tell him you've never seen The Godfather, and he'll explain it to you for 3 hours. Or Kate, that's the one you were mentioning, right?
No.
Oh, well, there's a lot of good moments. Or, whatever. Basically, when they're trying to like distract the Kens and like, quelch the patriarchy or whatever. So there's that joke. And it was something about like, I don't remember the exact context, but it was not part of that scene. The Zack Snyder bit occurs earlier in the movie. It's like within the first half of the movie, but it had something to do with like human fixations and arguments of some kind. Okay, Kate, what scene are we referencing
So
here?
I was trying to pull the first time she goes and sees Weird Barbie. There, I mean, we saw it in the trailer where she holds the Birkenstock in the heel and says, choose your
Yes.
fate." That part was funny, but as like a person who loves storytelling, I loved that moment because it was officially setting Barbie on a hero's journey, but then also ripping away the agency of Barbie, which was
Yes.
also really funny because they also do that in superhero movies. But in superhero movies, a lot of times, like it's because they're trying to like kind of give you a reason to choose this, even though the reason's only vague and doesn't really make sense a lot of times where they go on these journeys or whatever. Whereas Barbie had perfectly well written reasons why she would go on this journey and still needed to be told to go on the journey.
Right.
And I just really liked how that was played and how they fully confirmed that it was a hero's journey and that she had to pick the Birkenstock, and then how it finally resolved with the Birkenstock at the end.
Beautiful. Yeah, there's
Beautiful.
like these subtle moments that are like, okay, don't be fooled by the comedy and cheesiness here. We know how to tell a good story.
Hmm.
Well, we've talked a little bit about Superman. So let's talk a little bit more about Superman. You guys have been watching a Superman show.
Yes.
More like a Lois Lane show featuring Superman.
What are your thoughts? How are we liking it?
So it's the My Adventures with Superman, and it's an animated series on Hulu, and it's great. I I think briefly I mentioned before that with the new version of I think James Gunn's version of Superman, I wanted them to lean into like the intern or the first few years of them working at the Daily Planet and like that period of time. And lo and behold, I got an animated series about it, so that's pretty great. I love this version of Lois Lane. It's before she becomes a really good, renowned reporter. She has all the energy, spunk, and like drive of a great reporter, and none of the support system or credibility. And so she is just taking every little bit and chewing on it, and it's wonderful. I also think that the show's done a great job of writing the relationships without just letting it happen. When she found out who he was as Superman, it was a challenging story, and I think they were both justified in their responses. And it was an adult writing choice without it necessarily being an adult show, and still approachable for kids without it being explicitly a kids show.
Yeah. And that was strangely one of the things I did in terms of when I decided to start watching the show. It's like, who is this show? Like, who is it targeted for? Who is it intended for? And will I find anything to appreciate? And honestly, I think it's for people who obviously have a long time connection to the character. It's for people who don't know much about it but want to get involved with it. It's for particularly for people who love anime because of the style of it, and those sorts of things. I did have one question for you though, Kate. So it's
Mhm.
the name of the show is called My Adventures with Superman, and the question is who is this story being told? Whose perspective is this story being told from? Is it I mean the obvious answer you would think is it Lois? Is it Jimmy? Or could it possibly be existentially like Clark somehow, right?
I, I think it's existentially Clark. Um, I think it could be considered the group summation of the three of them, or the existential version of Clark, because they're playing it as he's just really starting to learn who he is. He's had these powers, but he's not really used them a whole lot before, and it's him kind of in this moment of time where as a person you would be really finding yourself as an adult and growing and learning your own, and playing that as like he's learning himself as Clark and learning himself as Superman at the same time, and establishing it as that's his adventures with Superman. I like that, but I also wonder if maybe it was just a comic book reference that I didn't get and went with it that way.
It's funny. I did not think anything about that. I think I might have mentioned this pod that I started listening to, which was just pretty cool, Supergirl podcast. And it was like one of the things they were talking about, like from the very first episode, because there was so much of like, I think the question obviously was like, who am I, or what am I supposed to be about? And it was a lot of existential questions. And then I thought about, and they were talking about the title of the show, and I'm like, you know, most of the times you just think, oh, it's a Superman show, but titles mean something. Like Superman and Lois, the title means something because it's both of them. They are a team. Smallville, the title meant something because it was sort of the origins. And so My Adventures with Superman, whether someone put that on the title board the very first day and they couldn't think of anything better, either way, it's a title and it should mean something. So I'm just wondering because you got three folks and it's like no one's thinking, hey, it's probably Jimmy, right? Thinking about My Adventures with Superman, but I think it feels like Clark more than anything, and then we'll see how it branches out. But I really dig the show.
Me too.
Well, now that I have reinstated Hulu to watch Only Murders in the Building, I will have to give this show a shot. And also do this cheapskate thing I do where I'll reinstate my Hulu for a show that I care about. And if you look at the title of this live stream, you can tell that is Only Murders in the Building. And then I'll watch everything that I put off watching on that streaming site for like the prior 6 months or whatever. So this joins a long list of Hulu stuff that I will be happily binging over the next few months. Thank you guys for giving me 5 extra minutes of your time. Thank you for putting up with my cat jumping on my keyboard in front of my camera, trying to attack my mouse cord, which is like kind of appropriate. Like that was him trying to make a pun, probably. And the cat fur that I felt on my face every moment since then. I will see you all probably in 2 weeks, but we're going to have to take a look at this upcoming desert and figure this out. But I know in 2 weeks we will have at least a couple more episodes of Only Murders in the Building to talk about. Bye. Oh, and their information is in the description down below to find them on Twitter or whatever Twitter is calling itself.